Okay, welcome to the City Council Ordinance Committee meeting of October 27th, 2021. It's 7 p.m. and this meeting is being held remotely, still under an executive order from Charlie Baker to be able to hold meetings remotely. Tonight we don't have any minutes to approve, and it's Councilor Peak and myself is here. It looks like Danielle's coming in. And I'll let Danielle join in since public speak. I'm not going to forget today. And so as soon as her audio connects, I'll see if she wants to speak before we dig into the agenda. All right. So Danielle, I see that you just joined. We're just about to do public speak. If you want to speak to anything that's not on the agenda, now's the time.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
No, I'm okay, but thank you.
Okay, awesome. This is continuing business. We are going to be talking about the Smart Growth District and planned residential developments. And I know, Jeff, you have some new developments since the last time we met. You were able to work on some new stuff. So why don't you let us know what that is, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, great.
Do you want me to make you co-host?
Sure, that'd be great. I will share my screen.
Okay. Sorry.
Someone, sorry. I am not good at multitasking.
It's
one
okay,
second.
Multitask.
Okay, I'm getting a request from. I was trying to pull up an email that I sent, to ordinance to queue this off, and then I saw an email from one of the Cernacs was asking for information to log in. So, I'm getting ready for Halloween over here. All right, this is. Give me 1 sec. I apologize. I think I did this to you guys last time. Let me mute myself. I'm going to send that email. I have it queued up, and then I'll come back.
Okay, it looks like we have a Jennifer Cernak in the waiting room, so I'm letting them in right now. And you're still muted, Jeff, just in case. Yeah. And so, Tom, while we're waiting, the EDIC met last week, and I haven't heard from them yet about if they had made any progress on that proposal that they were looking at. The way I left it with them was that I'd be happy to sponsor or co-sponsor, an ordinance to at least bring into the committee so we can start digging into that.
Okay, great.
And so I'm gonna reach out to them tonight and see if they made any progress, and then invite them to our next meeting. Cool.
Great.
And we'll wait for Jeff to send this email, and then we'll get started.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. So since the last meeting, I did some additional research that we all talked about, and I'm just gonna read from the email. So. This is not working for me tonight. Just lost it. Okay. So the important information, the most important information is that I have created a web page off the planning department for zoning amendments. The city clerk maintains one as well, but I took this opportunity to make sure that this is the place where we can keep loading information in the interim. What I did since the last meeting is I took what was drafted in 2008, especially for the highway business, because that ultimately got struck. So I re-added that into our text that we're kind of working from. Curtis in my office prepared a map, sort of an updated map of the parcels that we want to at least continue to discuss. Yesterday I finished the map and posted it, and I'll show it here in a minute. But We also show the density calculations that are part of the process with DHCD's review. Posted the smart growth design guidelines, and added, I did, and I'll go through this in the text of the amendment, made a couple small changes to the 40R language that were not previously there. So we're in the process of molding, the amendment so that it's ready to move into the public hearing process. And then I did have a communication with DHCD, and they started to outline the process for us moving forward. There's a preliminary request for eligibility that will be kind of the next step that we take. But I previewed with them that we're doing, at least right now, we're doing the same area that they've seen already. So they seem to really acknowledge that, but they did want us to submit that document, and that's what kind of cues us up in both processes.
Great.
So with all of that kind of as intro, this is the page. Again, it's off the planning department. This is because I have ready access to this. I don't have access to what the city clerk posts. And so she has previously not wanted to post every little bit of information. So I figured for now we can put this in here. So as you can see, the original packet that was submitted in the July 26th city council packet is there. That's the letter from Councilor Peak and the original set of language that we started with. I'm going to pull this up if it's okay to go through. So this is the revised zoning amendment language as of today. And so you will see that I am trying to keep track of things. And gosh, I think this one says October 18th. There might be a newer one. So let's see if my methods are really going to work tonight. But in the 40R, what we are doing, this was originally part of the packet, the plan unit residential development for affordable housing. And so we're in the 40R. We're adding, so this text here for the highway corridor mixed use, that's kind of this new conversation that we're having now. This is one of the changes that is coming up. So we have multiple projects going on at once related to affordable housing. The CPA funded a project with Valley CDC out of Northampton, who develops affordable housing, and they are doing some site assessments. They're looking at properties throughout town that might be suitable for affordable housing. And I think in there looking at it, they looked at the 40R and noted that this section here that says for under multifamily that residential units are not allowed on the ground floor unless the unit is handicapped accessible and located at the back. So they are identifying that as a constraint. And if we're looking particularly at the elementary school buildings, which, if we want the buildings to be renovated, we probably want to allow, the full renovation of the buildings, including ground floor residential. So I'm starting to propose some language here that would help us do that. Ground floor units may be allowed for projects containing 100% affordable units, or, and this is relevant to when we look out at the highway business district, other projects with a finding from the planning board that the project advances the purposes listed under 7.41 and the objectives of the smart growth design guidelines. So we should talk about that, but it's just an attempt to kind of put it in here as something that it's coming as a recommendation as we're going through these processes. So this is the use categories. I am a little bit afraid that the amendments I made the other day are not in this version. I'm going to see. What I had hoped to do is in this 7-1, which is the height and density requirements, this is for the downtown mixed use. Table 7.2 is the traditional neighborhood. And what I made was the amendment. I put back in the highway business standards. So I will go to that in a moment and show the group. But my goal was to have all the information posted here. The existing 40R map we covered last time, I'm going to test my work now because I loaded this yesterday, but the proposed 40R parcels district map. So good. This is the newer map. if we can all see this. What we're trying to do is mimic, for the purposes of this discussion, mimic what was presented in 2009. The green is what DHCD regulations are calling developable parcels. So basically they're either vacant or just like not utilized. And so that kind of fits, even the Tasty Top, there's a house on the Tasty Top parcel, but it's abandoned. So, and then the two lots across the street are the Cernak parcels, and they're just pavement. So they're like considered developable. The orange parcels get qualified as substantially developed. And I think the reason why this is something to distinguish is for DHCD purposes, the green parcels get a density calculation. And basically you can see the table that we're starting to build out is it's a calculation of developable acres times 20 times 20 units per acre, and it gives you this smart growth units. And so, you can see that if you tally up all these for DHCD purposes, their number of units is high. The area that's shown in green could yield 467 units. And I think that's the way that they come up with these density calculations and the incentive payments to the city. That's how they come up with those numbers. But I think it's really important for us to all know that you cannot fit that many units on these parcels because that number doesn't account for roads, parking, sidewalks, buildings, or stormwater management. So they don't subtract that out. They just go with this real base calculation. So these numbers are very similar to what was presented in 2008, except for, I think, these two small parcels here, 121.8-45 and 121.8-44 were not included. So those are additional, but other than that, we've kept the map the same. And the areas highlighted in yellow here represent property under certain ownership. And we talked about it at the first meeting, but in initial conversation with those owners, they said that they don't want to be included. So I think we have kind of always pegged that as a conversation piece, whether you want to proactively just overlay it anyway, or whether we want to exclude that. Then I think last time Councilor Derby asked for the design standards, and this is, I would call this a robust set of criteria that are established. And I think the nature of this is that the planning board, when reviewing a project, is supposed to go to this document and kind of go through each one and find out if the project is meeting these kind of standards or objectives. So, it's important. I won't read the whole thing, but it has a purpose, complementary and to nearby buildings and structures, consistent with our plans. So we have the housing plan, the 2008 master plan, and area specific plan or other document. So we have some of those. It's calling for high density quality development consistent with the character of building types, streetscapes, and community features traditionally found in densely settled areas of the city or the region. And then it's calling for kind of mixed use elements. I'll skip the applicability. There are general criteria. So Councilor Derby, I don't know if you want me to read through these, but I think it will be important as we move forward. I guess that's my question is, do you want me?
I don't think we need to read through them all right now. I think maybe if you scroll to just look at the other categories. I know that like environmental, it was like making sure that the buildings were up to a higher standard of with solar and those types of things, and then open space, because I mean some of these would affect how much of those numbers that we got from DHCD I imagine some of these design standards would affect how many units would be actually buildable, because it would can't block the view of the mountain, things like that, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I'll scroll through this, and I think it's not to say that this won't come up again, because I think as we move forward with the process, it'll continue to come up. And so this is not the only attempt to talk about this, but just looking at some of the words under sustainability, for example, it is important to note that a lot of these still use, and diversity actually use the words encourage. So I just want to be clear that these are not outright requirements, but they're encouraged. And the way that we would operate is that we would have any developer make sure that they're looking at this when they're in their design phase, and then they come to the planning board and they they justify whether they are able to meet stuff or not, and then especially if not, they need to explain why. So this is the sub-districts section, and interestingly, I think because this was made, the highway business mixed use sub-district was removed, during a vote at City Council, they actually did not remove this section. So this is our finalized document approved by DHCD. It's been certified by the clerk, but it actually still has this reference to the highway business sub-district. It's describing it as the main commercial corridor. Adjacent land uses include a residential neighborhood to the south, and commercial uses to the north, west, and east. One of the goals of the sub-district is to encourage the development of housing as part of new retail uses. By doing this, a new development in the sub-district could integrate residential uses to immediately access goods and services, which is a key smart growth strategy. New development in the sub-district should also promote walkability and pedestrian connections to the downtown. So, that kind of lays out a little bit of the purpose and is providing some framework for this group now. It calls for protection of natural, cultural, historic features. It talks about building placement, green building and renewable energy, parking and lighting. It talks about the building character and design. So it does it allows the planning board through the process to talk about building size, height, scale, massing, things like garages and driveways. These are all really important elements of especially a larger development proposal. So it gives the planning board some sort of the direction. Roof lines, energy efficiency, and universal access. Talks about circulation for pedestrian and bikes, access to public transportation, streets and sidewalks, and private streets, which I think would be important, I think, in this case, because if we imagine something going in to one of these properties, it would be probably a private street. It probably wouldn't be a public way.
So Jeff, can I just say one thing? So when we
Absolutely.
looked at the energy efficient building standards, one of the things they mentioned was Energy Star, and I think that we should probably, one of the things that we should earmark on there is to update is the newer design standards as it relate to net zero buildings and that the newest kind of technology that's coming out. I think that might be a good thing to add there.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense.
It looks like Tom has his hand up too. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, related to that, is these design standards, who was this written by the city council? I've never passed a design standard. Is this something that the planning department maintains? I just am wondering, in terms of, I think this is fine for now, but I'm just curious, if we wanted to do something like what Councilor Derby was saying, updating these design standards, whose job is that actually? And what's in the 4 years I've been here, I don't think we've ever voted on a design standard.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not the zoning ordinance itself. It's a document that stands aside from that. And, I know that we're running lots of threads here. When we go back to the actual 40R language, it talks about amending the design standards, and it talks about the process. I know one step is that DHCD wants to review changes to design standards. I would argue that this is a good time to address any desirable changes. and just run it through the process that we have for the zoning ordinance. I think we'll double check, but I don't see any problem with running it through that same process as we're doing it. I think it is relevant.
Well, and to kind of answer your question, also, Tom, when we first did the 40R overlay, this came with it. This was part of the process that we did, knowing that these design standards are basically, which are different design standards for each little sub-district, but went along with the overlay. So we were going to give them something, but we were also going to require a little bit of a higher standard of design. So that's kind of where that came from.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think there was probably a model, and then I think through the process it was tweaks, probably minor-ish tweaks made to make sure that it fits Easthampton, and then carried through the process. Parking, shared parking, reduction in parking requirements is allowed already. But I think as part of the amendment packages that we've been doing, we may want to lower the parking requirement, just so you lower the baseline requirement, and then the planning board could address it further as may be needed or not. Infrastructure, so this covers stormwater management. So this is another area, I think, Councilor Derby, I think a point is well taken, like to take a breeze through here and make sure that any references are still relevant, or if they're not, we should update them. Unfortunately, we still have subdivision regs from October 17th, 1990. Those have never been updated. Utilities, lighting, natural features, so open space, abutting conservation areas, permanent protection, and how that ownership would apply. There's a discussion about tree preservation, landscaping, and maintenance of it, and signs. So this is a great document to have. It's all encompassing, and I would argue that tweaks and understanding what it means is totally relevant. But the good thing is I don't think we need to necessarily recreate it. All right. So then I forget if we went through this, but this is the DHCD review approved materials. I might as well, if it's okay, Councilor Derby, just kind of recap all these. There's a lot going on here, but comfort zone is that most of this has been done at least once. What this should show is kind of two letters back and forth with DHCD. The previous planners submitted something, DHCD asked for something to be revised, and they submitted like a revised packet. So I'm pretty sure that's what's going to pull up here. And then there is a letter, I'm still trying to find it, but the letter officially approving from DHCD. So again, 2009, this is from the city planner back to DHCD with some additional materials. And I think it's pretty informative because it kind of recapped all of the proposed amendments together. And I think that's a big reminder, is that as part of this packet, let me see if as part of this packet, the downtown area, the Mill District, and some of these sub-districts on the right here were all approved. And so what we're really focused on is the highway business area for this discussion. This shows all the outlines of the area. I think what we're looking at, I was trying to get to the legend, and my Zoom is covering it, but okay, here we go. So it's the purple dashed is a half mile from geographic center of sub-district. So that's one of the criteria that they're looking for, is that there's goods and services or public transportation or some kind of level of activity in the area that you're proposing. And so the highway business district definitely has that. Okay, I'm going to keep going. This is an overlay of the map. Again, we followed these lines except for these two small parcels here that are shown on this area of NCS parking lot. And that follows the highway business district boundary as we have it today. So we would be proposing to add those two. these areas are off of Briggs and Davis Street, so they were already approved. This is the density chart that we talked about. So for numbers that we're looking at the smart growth units, I think the other map, the updated information was 467 units, and here it's 453 units, and I think that's attributed to adding those two little parcels. The yellow, again, is the substantially developed, and then the purple is developable. And so those are the ones that get that calculation. I did find this. So this would be a document that if we move forward, if you know, at some point we would decide to move forward with the highway business part, I think we would put together a new document to describe the district as it is today. You know, kind of outlining this, which is the benefits, the perceived benefits of doing this in the highway business area, which kind of covers this mixed uses, increase in affordable housing is the overarching goal, taking advantage of compact design. So that is a planning concept where if we can provide more density and do some of the buildings closer, we might actually be able to set aside some of the other portions of the property. Distinctive and attractive communities, so that goes to some of the design standards, preserves open space, strengthens existing communities. This is talking about design standards and visual and physical connections, transportation choices, and it does, you know, from a developer's perspective, which is really the only way that we're going to get housing built, is it makes it a little more predictable, fair and cost effective. And I think the predictability is something that we definitely hear a lot. So then it goes into the traditional neighborhoods. We don't need to cover that one. And then I think we covered this. I will not belabor this one, but this is that mayor's packet that we talked about. This is one of the files that I could find that was going through kind of, so if you look at the iteration, they talked about it for a little while in 2008 and then 2009. And then the vote was in 2000. Actually, the vote was in 2009, and then the amendment took effect in 2010. I think we covered this one, which is some general information back then about the 40R. I did this table last time, so great.
That's very thorough.
Yeah, and then the one thing I didn't pull up was the actual amendment with the dimensional requirements. So if you're, I think it's important. I don't want to skirt around that. So
yeah.
While you're pulling that up, I have one question. You don't want to multitask, so
that's okay.
Yeah. So when we're talking about this district, I noticed that on the other side of Northampton Street, there are two pretty substantially developed parcels to the north that are not included in the proposed district. And I guess I'm wondering, like, is the reason because they're substantially developed? Because I just thought, like, would it be possible that at some point a property owner there might want to renovate those structures in a way that might include an extra floor and housing and stuff like that? Like, is there any potential benefit to including those parcels just because we don't know what the future is going to hold for them?
Right, and I tried to put up the map. You're talking, so this one here would be CVS.
Yeah.
And then this one's,
right?
Yeah, Bach Plaza. I think it's a great question. You know, depending on, so Bach Plaza, without double checking with the GI, I think Bach Plaza is owned by the Gall family, which owns the parcels across the street. I don't know what the ownership of that CVS parcel would be, but
well, in this case, with either of those, we're just talking right now about the current ownership, but things could change hands.
Yep.
Or current owners could have a change of heart. I mean, I guess the question is, like, is there a reason why those wouldn't be suitable Because I guess, and I think we talked about this, and Councilor Zarrett made this point a little bit last time. I would just, my general thinking is if there's a parcel that like at some point in the future could be suitable for this kind of use, my preference would be to just zone it for that now. And if the whatever current or future owners never choose to take advantage of that, then, you know, it's not a big deal, but it would be like, you know, it would save us a situation where somebody is, you know, coming back and asking us to rezone to include their parcel, you know, now that somebody's got an idea for it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. So I think I don't want to be naive and think that it is as easy as just adding the layer over those parcels and calling them the substantially developed and kind of trying to nudge that forward. I don't know if there would be any kind of response at DHCD. But yeah, no, it makes sense. I think especially because we're in this geographic area, and I think my comfort level in doing it would be because that we kind of already looked at this area. In general sense of so far what I've heard from this group is that the area makes sense for mixed use or more dense housing. So I don't have any issues with overlaying it. For the purposes of kind of moving the conversation forward. I think moving to the other side, I know that previously there was another conversation about the other side of Route 10 closer to Southampton. So I would be a little bit more apprehensive to move over there without understanding a little bit more of the dynamic and you know, looking around. But here, this is very much in line with all the previous thinking. So
right. I think
okay, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I agree, Tom. I think that makes a lot of sense. And are we talking to potentially looking at going further north too, to potentially include some of the parcels where there already exists, you know, like large apartment buildings, where if the owner ever wanted to do something there, or are we just talking about staying within this, what we can see in this photo? What was your idea, Tom?
Oh, well, I mean, I was just looking at a couple, you know, and even there's another one like that I can sort of see, but there's just a couple like parcels right adjacent to this district. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that sort of the workflow that I think we generally agreed upon last time was that we were going to pass this stuff, and then, you know, at some time, maybe in the spring or summer of next year, we could potentially go back and take another look at like sort of a more broad citywide look into like what parcels should be available or shouldn't, like because there could be, you know, like the stuff on Route 10 closer to Southampton, for example, like to look at that stuff. But when we're talking about parcels that are literally just like adjacent to this zone that are currently, you know, they're not single family, they're currently being used for commercial purposes, you know, like I also see you know, on the side, you know, there's that commercial. I wish I could, you know what I'm seeing though. Like there's that little commercial building, yeah, right there. You know, what if those folks wanted to put some second story apartments on?
Yeah, that's Papa George, the Papa George building. Yep.
I just like those are the sort of things where I'm just kind of wondering, like, does it make sense to just consider if we're expanding it a little bit with those two small, the 4.4 and 4.5, does it also make sense to talk about the adjacent commercial properties?
Yeah, I think it's a rational expansion going adjacent, and I like that. I'm professionally speaking, I'm fine with trying to overlay those here. I think crossing past Highland or going further down, you know, I just want to make sure that if we're using an analogy of a snowball rolling down a hill, I don't want it to get too big. That because I'm very happy. I'm okay with all these discussions so far. You know, I will ratchet us back at some point to knowing that the zoning for the elementary schools is really has a critical point, and I pegged that previously, and I'm fine with, like, you know, in January, if we're still going back and forth at the joint hearing with the planning board, and we haven't, if there's still not clarity on what we want to do, then maybe we would bifurcate it, up. But
Yep.
I think for the purposes of right now, the adjacency argument makes a lot of sense to me.
Cool.
Okay.
And that's all I have to say about that. I don't need to take up the whole meeting talking about the adjacent parcels. I just was wondering if there was a reason not to consider expanding.
I think it makes sense, and if we can do it, let's try to get in there. And back to the point of like whether a landowner wants to have this or not. I think from my perspective, it's irrelevant whether they want it or not. I think that we look at the area and see if it's right for it, and at some point they might not be the owner. So,
or they might have a change of heart. But,
or they might have a change of heart,
or they won't, and they just won't ever use.
They won't use it.
But it doesn't hurt them in any way to have that option.
Okay, so I have clarity. In general terms, I'll add the CVS parcel, Bach Plaza, and
The Papa George.
Papa George. Yep. All right. So thank you. I think that's great. And then, so this is a document I will, after this meeting, I'll repost it. So as you can see, I tried to articulate the amendment dates. So there's draft number 3, which is October 25th. So I apologize for anyone. I sent this out. I sent it to a couple of people who might be on the call too, thinking that it was the right one on the website. So I really apologize. Nothing changed here yet. And nothing changed. This still has that ground floor amendment we covered already. What I did was no changes there. That was all previously kind of in there. This is what I added. I didn't mess with the order, so I just put this would be the new highway business mixed use subdistrict. I put it as table 7-3 because working in Word document and Redline is really a little tricky sometimes. I copied exactly what was in the 2009 text. So what we look at here is this gives this is the table of dimensions. So this is how some of the things get calculated, and the basic framework of what could be on these sites gets formulated here. If you look on the left side is uses. The next column is maximum height. And then we often distinguish between the height in feet and height in stories. And then the required, and I think one of the things we're trying to do so I didn't make any changes. So it says required residential density per acre. So townhouses, max height 3.5 stories. Same for duplexes, 3 family, and then the dwelling units, multifamily detached. There's a pretty big jump in terms of what's allowed here, 60 feet or 5 stories. And then we're into the 20 units per acre density. Assisted living. Interestingly, the numbers don't seem to jive. So it's 65 feet with 3.5 stories. So I don't know if I'll double check that. And then, the same thing. I will double check some of these numbers. I would presume that the maximum height in stories is what's correct. So it goes from 5 stories to 3.5 back to 5 stories for the mixed use neighborhood scale. And I guess just for reference purposes, so in the neighborhood, the traditional neighborhood village subdistrict, we aren't really going over 3 stories, and where the 5 kind of really comes in and makes some sense is downtown has 5. So that might be something that we talk about. That's kind of come up. The height of buildings came up when we were talking about cannabis uses.
Jeff, I think I can see what's going on here.
Okay,
I think
please.
The in the bottom 2 rows, the 6 and the 4 just got swapped.
Okay.
Because it otherwise makes sense, right? The 45 corresponds to 3.5, and 60 corresponds to 5.
Yes. Yep. I'm manually typing that in, so that's probably how that happened. One thing I just wanted to articulate here is in this first amendment. So for the downtown, it's in our downtown strategic plan as well as the housing production plan. This column for required residential density, their recommendation was to make it the required minimum residential density, because they were reading it as that's the maximum, just required, and you could go less, but you can't go over. And so a lot of people saw that, especially if you were talking about the schools. We want to give the flexibility to go above that density, that's the minimum. So that would be one of the recommended changes. Maybe we talk about carrying forward here under table 7.3, which is required minimum residential density, because the other features on the site is really what's going to dictate the actual number of units. So one more part of this is these are the area requirements. And so what I did, again, I added table 7-5, and it's the same text from 2009. So we're talking about front, side, and rear setbacks. And so, pretty much across the board, if you look actually all the way, even in the neighborhood village, it's all 20-foot front yard setbacks. There's some variation in the traditional neighborhood, but we're carrying a 10-foot wide side setback and 30 feet for the rear setback. So that's kind of across the board. They're a little bit in line with the downtown. Downtown is 10 foot, and then 20-foot rear setback. So those are I had intended to have that in the revised package. So that kind of gives the framework for some of the area and dimensional requirements. So I think that's kind of, where we're at with this. The text of this amendment would not change very much in order to bring in the highway business, other than tweaks that you guys would maybe make, or tweaks that would come up at the planning board. And then the map. So the map would be representing the parcels that we would be adding. And then there would be maybe some, I would say, relatively minor changes to the design standards. First, to make sure that they're up to date. And then if there's something that's glaringly, important to add or subtract or do something to that. So I feel like I've been talking a lot. I'm really sorry.
No, it's good. This is all good. I mean, this is what we've been waiting for. So, I think it's very helpful. I think just for a point of reference, do we have any other spots where there's 5 stories? The mills I imagine, are probably 5 stories. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in highway business at this point that's 5 stories high, is there?
Oh, in terms of existing 5 stories? Yeah. In the mills, I think the mills, if you're in the back of the mills, we definitely I'm pretty sure we achieve 5 stories there. Yeah, I think Easthampton Savings Bank is 3. I think it's 3 tall stories. I think that's 3 stories. In the downtown, I
don't think there's.
I think we cap out at 3. Yep.
So that's definitely, I think, a conversation that we'll need to have, especially if we want to protect view sheds and things like that.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well. I mean, it just seems, I'm sorry, Salem.
No, go for it. No, go for it.
I just, in terms of like areas where I could, see this being like a potential flashpoint. I know that like view sheds are a really, really important part of people's experience with Easthampton. And so it's like, could a 60-foot building be located, let's just say, on the Taste of Top parcel and not be a view shed issue is like my one big question. I mean, I think past that, I don't really, but I could just see a certain, like certain people, feel like not like being very concerned about that, and it maybe creating more controversy than we want on this process. So that's just one thing that I just want to be a little bit thoughtful about. It's just kind of, again, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but just sort of checking with like, what would that actually look like in practice, given that there isn't a whole lot of that around.
That was kind of my point. And I think, so as we move forward, that's one of the things I think we're going to have to circle back to. And I think another thing that might make sense within that is to, as we look at the design standards, some of those encouragements, do we have the flexibility to make some of those like shalls, so we can really incentivize new development, but also protect important features that make our community better, like view sheds and those types of things. So I think that that's something that we should think about as we move forward for sure. So, I mean, I'm happy to, if anybody on the call has any questions, I think this could be a good time. If anybody wants to make a question or a comment, feel free to raise your hand, or you can, I mean, since there's only 3 of you, you can also just unmute and say, I have a question. It looks like Keith may be unmuted. So
I did. Yeah, this is Keith Cernak. I'm out here in Silicon Valley, California. And I have those 4 parcels, those little teeny parcels right across from Courtney that, were marked. And 2 of them are marked for as developable. There should be another one on there, Jeff. The one on the right on the corner of Groveland and Northampton Street. That also is in the Highway Business District.
Great. Yeah. So if we can see the map here. So I will pull up the GIS, and I would like to confirm that because I think Keith had a question too about the other building. I believe we talked about this. I tried looking at the recording from the 9/28 meeting and I didn't catch it, but let me switch. This would be great if it's okay with the committee, because I think our initial goal was to overlay this over the Highway Business District. And then we talked at some point about not amending the base zoning, because it's a little bit different. Whereas with this overlay, that's optional, right? The overlay. And whereas amending the base zoning, is different because it really does dictate exactly what can happen. I'm going to be sharing that, Amari.
I'm seeing you, Jeff, but not any green or a map.
Okay, yeah, I'm fumbling around to get it.
No worries.
We have to be patient with this technology.
How are you folks all doing out there?
Pretty good. A little bit of rain, but hanging in there.
Yeah.
I imagine it's probably pretty nice in California right now.
Well, hopefully it's enough rain to stop wildfires, but we still have a considerable drought out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rain came down. We didn't know what it was.
There was some funny skit on some late night show about the rain, and you would think it was, I don't know, you would think it was a foot of snow. It's quite comical. Okay, yeah, so I can totally see that. I don't know if you can see the map with colors now. So I think what Mr. Cernak was talking about, this parcel 43 is the one on the corner of Groveland. So yeah, that, I think if the committee is willing, that is a vacant parcel, which would fit some of the criteria that we're looking at. I think previously the discussion was this parcel 42, which currently contains a single family house. I think that was the one where, if I'm not mistaken, we talked about this as a group, that to rezone from blue, which is like R10 probably, to the highway business would be kind of a separate amendment. But yeah, I do agree that 43 is in the highway business and would be potentially suitable to overlay, if that makes sense. I don't know if the committee wants to opine on that right now, but
that seems fine with me, and frankly, I'd be fine with. Because I also, when we're looking at it, like, is it 89 is also in the highway business building, or highway business district, and that was another one that we don't currently have in the overlay.
Yeah,
but I'd be fine for the same reasons that we discussed earlier. I'd be fine putting it in.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and I
don't know about like the other one that is right there is like the 97. That's the 93, 97. Those are like currently totally wooded, but definitely. Well,
and then it would be easy. We can just say, everything within highway business south of Highland and Florence Road would be part of the overlay district. Yeah, those geographic boundaries make sense.
Yeah, I just don't see any reason why not to.
Yeah.
Well, and this is Keith again. From my perspective, if we're looking, as you were talking about, I think it was Tom, looking at Highland Street and including an overlay of the houses there, number 42 is a single family residence on Groveland that I own as well. It would be great to have that overlay as well.
I think that piece, since it's currently not in highway business, that would have to be a separate probably a separate discussion because it's changing the underlying zoning, which I think Jeff was alluding to earlier, right?
Yeah, I think when we talked, I think, technically speaking, I think it's a different change than what was introduced to council. So the idea is that we presented to council amendments to the 40R and expansion of the overlay district. We're adding the conversation about the highway business, but we're not talking about changing the underlying zoning. So, we
It's not to say that we couldn't.
Right.
We haven't yet. So it's just sort of it would have to be like a separate process.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I would do, we could check. We could check with like the city attorney to find out if process-wise there would be any issue, because at the stage that we're at now, we haven't publicized an amendment yet or the public hearing. So, but I think the introduction to council, I think, if I'm learning, over the 4 years that step into council is important.
Mm-hmm.
So the safest bet, Keith, is going to be, for us to kind of ride out this discussion and then, come back to amend the highway business district itself.
I definitely would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions?
I had it. If nobody,
Go for it, Tom. Yeah, go for it.
Jeff, could we go over the allowed use table? I had read it on my own, but I think I was just I don't think we've actually gone over that as a committee yet.
Yeah, good point, Tom.
Yep, I am going to hack my way back into this and find. The kids are going to bed, and it's causing a little stir over here. Okay. Okay, I found it. I thought I was sharing my screen, which I wasn't. So we covered, I think, how this works generally is that we lay out the uses on the left side. And then, the idea is generally that we're prohibiting uses with a no, with an N. In this case, many of the uses are plan approval, which means that it still goes to the planning board, but the ability to deny it, is low. The ability to deny it is low, but the planning board would then be able to shape the project, and that would be all those design criteria and that sort of thing. But the underlying use, has been determined to be somewhat acceptable in that area. And I don't think anything in here should have a special permit, but I think the special permit would be the most restrictive, the least predictable, and it's like kind of discouraging the use by making a special permit. And I'm not sure that we can make the housing like a housing use under the 40R. So remember, the 40R is to increase housing, especially affordable housing. I don't think we can make it a special permit. I think it has to be by plan approval. So,
and that's, I would want that. So
okay,
yeah,
perfect. Okay. So, I'll just take a stab, Tom. I don't know if you have questions, but like single family dwellings are usually, once we're in the commercial districts or the downtown, the reason why it's a no is like we actually don't want just a single family house to pop up on one of these lots. It's not dense enough. And then so we go to 2 to 3 family townhouses. And then I think one of the, townhouses, could be a different style of housing development, which I would maybe brush out our definition, but multifamily residential uses over 4 units is probably what we're talking about. And from there, Tom, I don't know if you want me to scroll through.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I think, we talk about assisted living residence when there's a definition, nursing home, and then kind of we shift pretty quick into retail and service. So that goes to convenience market.
So I'll just here, if you don't mind, I just have one question. Are there, when we're talking about the retail and service ones, are these the use types like that are generally allowed in the highway business in general, or like are there ways in which these vary from what the retail and service in the highway business district look like?
Yeah, there probably are some. The test, I think, would be like an automobile. Let's pick an automobile use, and look for drive-through restaurant. I would guess that some of those heavy automobile-oriented uses are not promoted here. And so, again, the idea is that with the smart growth, it's mixed uses. So this could be a commercial building at the front, like up on Route 10, with a driveway going into housing units. Yeah, as long as like on one parcel that constitutes mixing the uses together, or it could be mixed use in a single building. But I would guess that to encourage the mixed uses in affordable housing, like we're not talking about gas stations,
right?
Service stations or drive-through restaurants. Like that was my quick. I think those were the things that we could maybe contrast if I opened like our existing zoning. So,
that makes sense.
Okay, sorry if I went too long on that. So we go back to supermarket, professional offices, drugstore, childcare, restaurants or bars. So this does say not including drive-in or drive-through. Based on what we see on Route 10, we should know that drive-in and drive-through are allowed under the highway business.
Right.
It's been a pattern. Like a bakery and all those associated uses, bed and breakfast, beauty, barbershop, hair salon, tanning salon, or similar establishment, laundry or dry cleaning. And then there goes into this neighborhood scale mixed-use development projects allowing 2 or more uses within the same building. And that was a no. And the contrast is this downtown scale mixed-use development. So the way they break this out and define it is at the bottom. The description, if you look at C, is neighborhood scale shall mean buildings with maximum height of 3 stories and 40 feet. And then D is the downtown scale, meaning maximum height of 5 stories or 60 feet. So apropos of our discussion earlier, that probably should be looked at. Whether we want to do the downtown mixed use scale, which is the 5 stories, because if there's consensus that that's not quite what we want, then we probably want to flip these. I'll go back up. We want to flip.
Right. Yeah.
Flip. Not allowing the 5-story version, and so the neighborhood scale would become a PA, and the downtown scale would maybe become a no or not. I don't know what the consensus would be. So going through mill renovation, mixed use, so we're saying no because there's no actual mills there. These kind of wholesale transportation industrial uses, so you get research offices, wholesale trade and distribution, general manufacturing, not commonly considered hazardous or noxious, publishing, data processing, computer software, warehousing, self-storage facility, and then it goes into accessory uses. So Tom, I think what you're really asking is to maybe look at this list of uses compared to the highway business uses.
I think I basically understand this and don't disagree with any of it. So that's fine. I just wanted to go over it.
Okay. I would propose that at some point, I'm assuming we would advance this at some point to the planning board. I would put together a table that would show those two for that discussion, just to make sure that we've compared and contrast the uses and have done that. I think that would be a good exercise to do.
Cool. Yep. That sounds good. So Jeff, as far as your comfort level, as far as where we are in the process now, because I know we're not in a rush to necessarily get this to the planning board. But I feel like some of the things that we were kind of waiting to get kind of sorted before we brought it to the planning board have kind of worked themselves out a little bit. How do you feel about that at this point?
I guess I think what we should do in the kind of following the pattern that Tom has done before is it might be useful to go through the design standards once. Okay. And make and show some red lines. I can update the map with all the things we talked about, and then I think we should bring that back one more time, okay. And then I think we should button it up and then like send it. Oh, and that's what I was sorry. That's what I was thinking about is, how do you want to handle this 3-story versus 5-story? Do you want to like hold it? Like allow both, and then have the discussion with, because we are, we don't have any broad community input right now, but that's the purpose of the planning board in your joint public hearing. So do you want to like maybe put PA for both of those and then have that discussion go forward, or do you want to like or do you want to do something different, which would be do what we talked about, switch it, make 5 stories not allowed, and then have that discussion?
My gut tells me to do it that way, make it so 5 stories aren't allowed but have a discussion where if there was a strong community input that wanted that, then we could look at going backwards to that. But I have a feeling that piece could ignite some, opposition to this just because of the nature of it. So, and it seems a little out of character. So, I'm fine with doing it that way. How do you feel about that, Tom?
Well, if we're going to stick with the 5 stories, the one thing I would want is just some language somewhere in there about view sheds, because I really think that is the main reason I think if somebody wanted to create a 5-story, if like you're talking about like Bach Plaza, right? If someone was like, oh, we're going to put 4 stories of apartments above Bach Plaza, I do not think anyone's going to care.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If you put a 5-story apartment block, like 5-story apartment blocks on the Tasty Top parcel, and there was thought that was going to be, that parcel does kind of dip off. So like, I'm not actually convinced it would be a huge problem, but that I'm sure it would be like the primary community concern. Yeah. And so if there was just some language in there about view sheds somewhere, then I think it's probably okay. But I think the easiest way to do it would be to just not allow it. But if we think that there's actually a potential benefit, then I'm open to discussing it further. But I do think there just needs to be some sort of understanding that like there's just certain places where the views are a really big perk of living in Easthampton.
Right. And if we put it as, 3-story was allowed and we went to the planning board, there's nothing stopping us from putting it back to 5 with that heightened design standard saying only on the, the west side of the street, like something like that. Right. So, but I do think that one could potentially be a trigger. So, But Jeff, I do like your idea of getting the map finalized and going through those design standards as a committee once before we bring it to the planning board. So we at least have a red line version that we can bring to them and have a little bit of cohesion as far as, the direction we're going for that. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So I will work on a little bit of language about 5 stories, with consideration of the view shed, and I don't know exactly how the word will come out, but it'll be in a red line committee. This committee can make a final decision at the next meeting whether that stays or goes. But yeah, I think that's a really good approach, and it gives me one more opportunity to figure out how we run the 2 processes with our process with DHCD. So I can kind of work on that at the
perfect
in between. Great,
sounds great.
And I think that it might be easier for me to set our next meeting by text and then just fold you into that, Jeff, because since Owen's not here, and I think his schedule seems to be pretty busy these days. So is that okay with you, Tom? If we
That's fine with me.
Okay. All right. So I think that's a good place for us to break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I talk schedule for 1 second? Sorry, I know this is what everyone wants to go, and I always belabor it, but
No.
so City Council meets November 3rd, and then November 17th, and then probably December 1st. All right. So it may not be that critical, but what would be ideal is if, right, because from your next meeting, you need to go to the next full city council meeting to set the planning board's joint public hearing. So,
I think we can get it done by the 17th.
Yeah, 17th
If
probably.
we met sometime on the week of the 9th.
yes. Okay. All right. I just wasn't sure if that was that's fine for me, because there's not too many changes. That would be great, because that way on the 17th, the full city council meeting on the 17th, you could ask for the hearing to be set, and then we would look in December sometime with the 2 weeks notice and that kind of thing,
Right.
to have a meeting in December. All right, that would be great. I think that
All right.
works.
So I'm gonna text the other members and see if we can get the week of the 9th nailed down, and then as soon as that happens, I will let you know and we can post it so everybody else can be aware. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Jeff, thanks so much for all that work. I appreciate it.
No
Yeah, I
problem.
know it's a lot. So I am happy to entertain a motion to adjourn, Tom.
So moved.
All right. I'm going to second that. And then I will ask if, Tom, you will vote for that.
Aye.
And I will vote aye as well. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it. Have a great one.
Have a
Take
good
care.
evening.